Welcome back everyone to the 8th episode of America Unplugged. I'm your host Manny, and today we're going to be talking about one of Biden's executive orders, specifically the executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Now, I come from the stance of if you're an adult, you live your life however you choose. So long as you're not infringing on anyone's rights or liberties, so long as it's not affecting anyone else. You choose how you want to live your life. I won't judge you. Don't judge me. I won't impose my beliefs onto you. Don't impose your beliefs onto me. But when it comes to having this sexual identity or transgender culture implemented into schools, into the pediatric population, that's dangerous for numerous reasons. Number one, children aren't psychologically developed. So for anyone to suggest a permanent change to a child's physiology simply because they state that they identify as this or that, that's extremely irresponsible. But that's not the focus of this podcast. I want to focus on the health portion because the Biden administration has been quoted time and time again saying to follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. Why is it that when it comes to this woke culture of transgenderism and someone's sexual identity, that the science goes out the window? Now again, if you're an adult, I won't judge. You live your life how you choose, okay? But with children, that should be completely out the window. Never mind personal beliefs about this. Never mind the fact that a child is still psychologically developing. Let's focus on the science. Now, as I said, this order is meant to tackle any type of discrimination that transgender people may face, including within the pediatric population. And I'll read a small excerpt of this executive order. Quote, children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. So basically, children should be able to participate in the sports of the gender they identify with. So if the child was born a male but identifies as a female, this executive order will ensure that this child will be able to participate in female sports and vice versa. This opens up an entire problem from a healthcare perspective. Now, let's just use one example. Let's just start with the brain. The brain being part of neurosciences and medicine. And within neurosciences lies mild traumatic brain injuries, otherwise known as concussions. Now, anyone who's familiar with concussions know how much of an impact it can have on a child's life, depending on the severity and treatment options, and how soon the concussion is identified. Things such as cognitive function, vestibular, ocular, motor, these can all be negatively impacted with a head injury. Most people know that. It can affect someone's life. It can have an impact so great on someone's life, especially a developing child, to where they can go from being an A student to a C, D, F student. It can affect their social life, their personal relationships, their moods. They can become more irritable. They may not be able to retain things. It can affect their vision. It can lead to severe cognitive impairment. Now, what a lot of people don't know is being a female, biologically a female, is also a risk factor. Numerous studies have shown that the female gender is much more affected by concussions than the male gender. Now, let's go ahead and go through some of these studies. And I'll go ahead and link these studies, as I always do, in the description section of this podcast. So first, in soccer, a 2007 study showed that the concussion rates for girls was 68% higher than boys. A 2011 study showed that concussion rates for girls in high school soccer was double that of boys. A 2013 study of data collected by the author of a report by Safe Kids Worldwide and the Consumer Product Safety Commission through its National Electronic Injury Surveillance System found that girls in soccer were more likely than boys to be seen in hospital emergency rooms as a proportion of all sports-related injuries. In basketball, a 2007 study found the concussion rates in high school basketball were almost 3 times higher for girls than for boys. A 2011 study reported that concussion rates for girls was 1.7 times higher than for boys, and a 2013 study found that 11.5% of injuries seen in girls basketball were concussions compared to 7.2% of boys. The list goes on. Basically, girls are more at risk for concussions than boys, and simply being of the female gender poses a risk factor. It's actually a preset risk factor for concussions, and that's just for head injuries. That's not getting into anything else. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say, well, when it comes to pediatric sports, there isn't going to be much of a difference until you start getting into the teenage years. That's far from the truth. A study published by the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, titled Physical Fitness Differences Between Prepubescent Boys and Girls, shows that in the study involving 312 children, with an average age of 10 years old, showed that the boys presented higher values in all selected tests except tests of balance and flexibility, in which girls scored better. What were those selected tests? They were aerobic fitness, strength, flexibility, speed, agility, and balance. Now, people will say, well, what about build? That comes into play, right? A more husky boy versus a skinnier girl? Well, the study also concluded that the physical activity in the girls and the endomorphic and body fat in the boys did not have a significant effect. The overall consensus of the study was that in prepubescent children, one cannot neglect the influence of genetic determinism observed from the morpho-constitutional point of view. This is just one study, folks. There are numerous studies out there that show that there is a clear physical difference between boys and girls. Now, I get the woke culture is trying to lay this out as we need to empower people. It's not a matter of who's better because of physical ability or strength. It's simple human anatomy. And if you're a parent out there, don't succumb to this quote-unquote woke culture, because there is the medical aspect of your child's well-being that you have to consider. This whole transgender movement within the pediatric population is extremely irresponsible because you are exposing your children to higher risk. There is a clear difference between boys and girls. I just covered concussions. There are a large variety of injuries that your children will be susceptible to because of this woke culture. Now, I've already been attacked by the left because of my critique in stances that they've taken that I disagree with, such as my last podcast on the radical left twisting Dr. Martin Luther King's words. So as a result, because of this tribalist hive mind mindset, this us versus them mindset, whenever I try to point out something that will be for the well-being of everyone, not just conservatives, not just the right, I get attacked. Because if I'm not with them, I'm against them. Guys, this is not the case. I am willing to, and I will, as I come across them, point out things that I disagree with regardless of side. I'm not here to choose sides. As I said in episode 4 of the podcast, my only loyalty is to the United States Constitution, not party affiliation. So please, if there's anything I want you to take away from this, is to not put your children at higher risk because of this woke culture when it comes to participating in sports. Do not have your developing children participating in sports with the opposite gender. If you have a son who was born male, I never thought I'd be saying this, but okay. If you have a son who was born male, but now identifies as a female, do not put him in a female sports team, because you will be putting the girls in that team at higher risk of injury. If you have a daughter who identifies as a boy, do not put her in a male team because she will be much more susceptible to injury. I can't believe we're even having these conversations or that I'm even using these words right now. But as a parent, if you are one of those parents that have children who identify as transgender and you are going along with it, for your child's well-being, do not allow them to participate in sports with the opposite sex, anatomy-wise, not identity-wise. So I know that most of the listeners of this podcast aren't those parents, but I figured I would at least address, in the off chance that there are parents out there that fall within the scope of what I'm talking about, then that was directed to you. You're not doing your children any favors by allowing them to participate in sports with the opposite gender. And to the Biden administration, you're contradicting yourselves. You keep on talking about follow the science, listen to the science. But with this executive order, you are putting children at risk. It is highly irresponsible. You should be ashamed of yourselves. All for what? For woke culture? This is unheard of. Anyways, as always, I will link the studies referenced in the description section of this video. You guys come up with your own conclusions. I always encourage you to think for yourselves. I won't make this video too long. That's all I really had to say about that. It's a concerning time that we live in. Anyways, this is Manny with America Unplugged, signing out.